accidental. I had an accidental first contract, if that makes sense, which is kind of what made me think maybe I'll stick at this rather than keep going. But that contract has subsequently ended through nobody's fault but a funding glitch. So yeah, it's I'm in the real world of actual consulting, of actually having to find actual contracts as opposed to somebody just giving me a job.
That's great. We have a lot of accidental consultants who then snowballed that into full consulting practice. So that's a well-trodden path. Nora, welcome. Tell us about yourself.
Hi, I'm Nora. I'm based in Berlin and I'm a migration researcher, but I also do already some kind of consultancy work. But I was working at the university and decided to not continue in academia. So now I got into the freelancing and I have some projects, but yeah, I thought it's nice to learn also maybe how to make it more strategically, not reacting by offers, but also thinking how I can kind of build my own vision.
Fair enough. We've got a lot of migration consultants at the IC Hub for obvious reasons, and also academia is also a good pathway towards consulting. Welcome, Alicia.
Hey everyone, so I'm Alicia. I'm originally from Madrid, but I'm living in Brussels. My experience is mostly in communications, project management, and public affairs. I'm looking to start into consulting in international development as well. Actually, I already had some experience in that just because of COVID. I was working in China for an international organization, and then because of COVID, I had to go back home, and then I just had like a kind of freelance contract with them that lasted for a year. So I'm looking into how learning more about how to look for new opportunities and also get the skills so that I feel more confident to start up.
Fantastic. Well, hopefully we'll help you get there. And Sarah.
Hi, everyone. Yes, I actually tried to connect with this hub several months ago, but I was in the process of moving. And so I don't think I was ready to kind of get into the world of consultancies just yet. Now I'm ready. So I have a background in working mostly for IOM, working on migration, fundraising, program development. And I'm really interested in like consultancies on like project evaluations. I did a bit on the other end, like managing consultants. And so I sort of know a little bit about like how things go recruiting consultants from like IOM side. So I do want to kind of break into this like looking, building a network and becoming a consultant, similar to what Alicia said, like just kind of, I want to get a sense of like building my sense of confidence too. I feel like it's those first few consultancies you need to get, and then it kind of, you build some momentum there. So that's what I'm looking for. So thank you.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Thank you. And the biggest category of people who ask me and who ask us about consulting is our clients, a lot from IOM. So yeah, welcome and hope we can help. Who else have we got? Elena.
Yes, hi, I'm Elena. Yeah, so I'm originally from Italy, based in Amsterdam, but I spent about 10 years in East Asia. My background is actually in international relations and Asian studies. So I was in Japan, Hong Kong, Singapore, and now I'm back here. And I mostly work in communications and digital marketing. And I'm an activist and an accidental consultant as well, because I was with Greenpeace for over 5 years. And then last year, for contractual reason, I changed a lot of Greenpeace offices, and then they hired me as a freelancer. So I've already been like a freelancer for a year, but I was still doing what I had been done for a long time. And I worked on different types of campaigns related to the environment. I got other clients in between, but now I'm also looking for new clients. And I think that's what's been a bit difficult, finding new clients and also like gaining that confidence to promote yourself and telling others what you're doing and see what are actually the skills that you can offer that differentiate you from others. So yeah, I would say these are the main areas. So yeah, environment, climate, comms, and yeah, I'm working on some passion projects actually. So connecting the arts and music to climate change. So I'm doing that because I love it. Yeah. And I'm so grateful to find this community, to have found this community, by the way. It's so difficult to find information. Yeah,
we're grateful to have you there, and consulting is also a good thing that you can combine with other projects too. That's why we like it. Carmel.
Yeah, so just like Maria, I really feel excited to be part of this new group. So thank you for the space. And so I started consultancy just because I had no other options. I applied to all these jobs and none of them flew. And so then I said, I'm going to start my own thing. So I started my own consultancy agency. It's called netlove.org. And yes, so the first consultancy, like Alison said, it actually came by accident. That old people who I used to work with contacted me through World Vision. And then I used to work at the UN as well, so I have some contacts with UNICEF as well, so I did some consultancy with them as well. But I'm really starting, so I'm curious to learn about each one of you and just to deepen my understanding around the topic.
Great, well, welcome, Carmel. Was it Nathan that introduced us?
Yeah, he spoke so highly of you that I said to myself, I have to attend the workshop. No, but I'm very happy to be here.
Raised expectations.
I know, yeah.
All right, thank you very much. And Nanti.
Hey everyone, could I actually go last? I'm multitasking at the moment right now in the DMV area, so if that sounds good with everyone.
No,
thank you.
That will be in a minute though. Anna Laura.
I'm sorry.
Welcome. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah. I'm sorry. I just got here. Well, thank you also for this space. When I saw it, I was very interested because I have work in the humanitarian development sector. However, and I have done some consultancies as well, like more that I have gotten like more with people that I have known before. But I would like to know more on like how to be a consultant, because that's like more formally in those kind of terms, but because it's one of my options. I've also looked for jobs for some time, and then I had another opportunity and continue with that, but it's something that I would like to do in the future or in the near future. So yes, so I wanted like to have a better idea on that, what to do, what not to do, or whatever. I think everything is going to be very, very useful. Mm-hmm.
That's great. Thank you very much for joining, and hopefully we can answer some of those questions for you. And for last and not least, Ananti, are you ready to introduce yourself, or you're still
Nora?
Wait, is anyone else?
Did we speak to Nora?
I thought.
Did we?
I thought so. Has anyone not introduced themselves yet? Speak now, forever hold your peace. Okay, Ananti, here's your time. If not, then we'll get into the webinar and hope that you can maybe put a little introduction in the chat if you so wish.
No, thank you, Malin Loskin, and apologies, everybody. Thank you. My name is Ananthi Zanre, and I'm based in the DMV area in the US. And I'm very much interested in learning about consulting, as my long-term goal is starting my own consulting business. And I've been in the international development space for about 7 years, doing project management work, food security field experience, and regional experience in West Africa, along with business development, and along with other things I'm really into gaining in terms of my skill sets. So I'm very excited to be a part of this webinar to learn more about consulting.
Fantastic, thank you, Ananti. All right, let's get into this then. So this webinar today is all about launching your consulting practice. It's really aimed at people who are either in what we would call the reflection stage. So either you're not a consultant and you're interested in seeing whether it's right for you, or you're already a consultant or an accidental consultant. You might have worked on a project or two and are looking at how you can turn this into more of a career than just something that happened by accident. We'll also introduce ourselves briefly in a moment for those who don't really know us. and we won't do this welcome because we just done a welcome. Well, yeah, Molly's going to tell us a little bit about the objectives, how we've structured this webinar for you.
Yeah, so, well, it's just a short one. So we're going to try to squeeze everything into an hour and also with time for questions. So the goals are to first understand independent social impact consulting. And that includes the realities and then all of the opportunities that are out there right now. And then the second objective is to identify the skills and attributes required for the consultant or someone who's thinking about becoming a consultant. And then because it's not for everybody. And then the third objective is to kind of dip our toes in the water of getting started. So we'll give you kind of a brief overview. Obviously, there's a lot that you need to do when you want to get started. So we'll just give you a few, pointers to get you started.
Exactly. And also you're going to want to stick around to the end where we'll give you some free resources that we've got for people like you, and also tell you a little bit about our IC Hub Startup Incubator Program. For those who are eager to launch very soon or in the process of starting up, and we're glad to have Sarah with us, who is our part of our IC Hub Startup Incubator. Great. Also, if there's anything else more specifically that you'd like to know and that you'd like to get out of this, just drop it in the chat and we'll make sure that we get to it. But indeed, the idea is to really have plenty of time for Q&A to answer your questions. And you can ask questions at any time as well in the chat. Just a few polls that I wanted to share with you to get a bit more so that we can understand a bit more about you. So I'm going to launch a couple of polls, so look out for them and let us know what you think. So I'm launching the first one now to really understand where are you right now. Are you not yet a consultant but interested in learning? Are you recently launched as an independent consultant, or have you been a consultant for more than 6 months and perhaps looking to launch or relaunch in a bit more of a structured professional way? Pretty even split then. That's quite interesting. Oh no, the people who've been a consultant for more than 6 months are winning out. Okay, cool. Right, but still a fairly even split between the other two. Great.
Oh yeah, and one of those was mine. Sorry.
One of those was Molly's. And Molly
I just wanted to make sure I was working. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
It's an even split. Really,
oh yeah, I don't think you can actually see the results. So that's
yeah,
what
now
we've
I
got.
can see.
Okay. Great. We've got another one as well. If I can work out how to put it up. Yeah, we also want to ask a bit about your current or most recent situation. So, I mean, this is kind of, if you are a consultant already or in between jobs or whatever, this will be your most recent situation. So, and there's 2 questions also about how much experience you have after graduating from university. So I'm just launching those polls now. Let's have a look at those. It's really just curious to see who's in the room. Everyone's going to have a slightly different pathway towards consulting. And we want to try and also provide a bit of tailored support so that you understand what's going to work for your pathway. Okay. Hello, welcome, Amin. Would you please mute your microphone? Okay, I'll mute him. Okay, a couple still.
No, should I?
Okay.
Oh, thank you, I can hear you.
Okay, good. I'm going to end that poll now then. So
Okay.
we can see that. Hello, if we could mute microphones for now. Okay, so we've got people who have been working for international NGOs, intergovernmental organizations, social enterprise, and also student, well, one student. Okay. We've also got, in terms of experience, we've got people of all levels of experience, and this is post-university experience. We'll come to this in a moment, but certainly we found that the sweet spot tends to be 5 to 10 years or more of career experience. We don't normally recommend independent consulting as a way to start your career. That's not to say it hasn't been done. And I started my independent consulting relatively early in my career after only 3 years of experience, or less than 3 years of postgraduate career experience. But generally, we think that it's a bit easier once you know a little bit what your own skills are and how the sector works before you provide services as an independent consultant. But you certainly don't need to have loads of grey hairs or loads of experience. You just need to have some sort of understanding about what your skills are, what the marketplace is like.
Yeah, I was in the 6 to 10 year range as well.
Yeah.
A bit later, but yeah, in the sweet spot.
Cool. All right. So just very briefly about us. So I think some of you already know us, some of you might not know us. So Molly, tell us about you.
So I have about 2 years of consulting experience. I started my career as a Peace Corps volunteer in Burkina Faso, where Ananti also started as, I don't know, a lot of young people do. And then I went to China for 3 years, and then I was in India working with a social enterprise, and I was doing all these different projects and things. And then kind of coached by Loxanne, I decided to take on full-time consulting. And I had a few different consulting projects, but I never considered myself a consultant until we went through the process, which is basically what we're going to go through today. This process of actively choosing to be a consultant. So, well, we'll talk about that more today, but that's kind of a bit of background about me, and also about why we set up this this like webinar and the structure in this way was very much based on Loxanne's experience, and then our experience of me going through this process.
Yeah. Exactly, and it's also just a case of, you know, I've been an independent consultant for eight years, migration specialist, doing research work, training work, and policy analysis for mainly for intergovernmental organizations and governments through intergovernmental organizations. And so, you know, I kind of started as a consultant 8 years ago and made lots of mistakes, and gradually built my consulting practice to where it is today. And then we launched Molly in a bit more of a purposeful way and a more of a structured way. And then it worked. So we thought, okay, there is a bit of method to this madness, and no one else seems to really be teaching this. And we didn't feel we had the support and resources that we needed when we started. So that's why we're trying to do this whole IC Hub thing. Yeah, but I also started consulting when I was in Burkina Faso, an accidental consultant. I was just offered a random consultancy assignment with International Organization for Migration, just by a friend who needed help with the consultancy assignment, and then ended up snowballing that into more consultancy assignments, you know, better structuring and targeting my service offering, and so on and so on. And we also, just another thing is just that we really just love consulting for the flexibility that it brings, but which is well documented, but also for the fact that you get a lot more control in general over the kinds of stuff you work on, whom you work with, and how you use your own impact. So that's really where the attraction is for us. All right, great. Well, let's get into this a bit more then. So first of all, I think everyone on this call has a pretty decent idea of what we mean when we say an independent consultant, but nevertheless, I would like to ask you to just type in something that you think characterizes an independent consultant or independent social impact professional, freelancer in the international development space. You know, what does that term mean to you when we talk about a consultant or an independent social impact professional? It may seem obvious, but this is also for those who are following the replay of this. Just want to make sure that we're all on the same page.
Also, can you guys see the slides? Is that actually showing up as the slides? No,
right, no.
Yeah,
Okay.
Yeah, I didn't think so.
So
This is the audience window.
Oh, okay. I think I was showing the wrong window.
See, and now can you put on? Can see the notes.
See the notes. Oh no. All right.
Present.
Well, we'll figure out how to do that while you type in what you understand by a consultant.
Yeah, I'll give you a minute to just put it into the chat box.
That should be it.
Yeah.
Okay, a provider of professional services within a time scope limited agreement. Yeah, I'll just kind of make the point about the consultants who are consultants in name, but it's more of a contract thing, right? Especially in the UN system, but also in the broad international development system, you have a lot of, or UN agencies tend to hire a lot of people who they call consultants, but it's really a short-term contract of like 6 months or so, and that consultant may still need to go to the office 9 to 5 and really have a lot of the same functions as an employee, and wouldn't be really recognizable or distinguishable from an employee. So that's something we try to really make clear at the IC Hub, is that we're talking about independent consultants in the kind of service provider sense. You know, you're delivering deliverables, you're delivering a service offering. That's not that, well, you may decide to work 9 to 5, but you're not required to work specific hours for your client. Okay, see you later, Ananti. Thanks for joining.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then there's another comment here from just above, from Elena.
Yeah, Elena, someone who brings value to different organizations and teams. Absolutely, that's what we all hope to do. Carmel, someone who is called upon to work on a specific project program report to support a business or organization offering their expertise. Yeah, I would agree with that as well. Great, all right, let's continue along the road and tell you a little bit about how we categorize it.
Yeah, so as Roxanne mentioned, there are a lot of different terms. There's a lot of different types of contracts that are floating around, especially in the social impact space. And so some of the terms that you might have heard are things like facilitator, specialist, expert, contractor, freelancer. And one that we like is solopreneur. So it's just, you know, these are different terms that you might have heard or that you might have even applied to yourself. But here we really focus on this social impact, which means anything with a social change element, including international development. And then we use consultant, but you might want to apply something like facilitator or specialist. I actually use specialist quite a lot. So anyways, there's some different terms floating around, but this is what we're talking about. And then also from the client's perspective. So today we're talking a lot about our perspective as a consultant, but it's also good to keep in mind the client, because the client is ultimately who you're trying to serve and who you're adding value to. So why a client might choose to work with a consultant is that increasingly with a project cycle, as was mentioned in the chat, there are fixed terms of a project usually, and funding usually extends for that project period and then it ends. So it's a risk for the client to actually hire someone full-time when they only know that they have funding for a specific project in a specific period. So hiring a consultant gives them that flexibility to work in a very heavily projectized system. And then it also allows clients to bring in outside expertise on a specific issue. So they don't need to hire that person full-time. They're just bringing you in for the specific advice on a certain issue. And then it also allows for for their employees or the people they're working with to have more flexibility with their lifestyle choices and needs. So I think we can see on the call there are a lot of women folk out there, and so it can often be helpful, you know, not just for women but for men if you're having families, if you're moving around, especially in international development. It's hard to attract the right talent. So from a client's perspective, to give employees a little bit more freedom, they might choose to use consultants instead of full-time employees. So those are some of the reasons clients might have. Obviously, everything, you know, it varies quite a lot from client to client, but that's just a little overview of the broader picture and how consulting fits into that.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, and we've got a couple of people who have joined a little bit late, Sylvia and Amin. So welcome. Feel free to just introduce yourself in the chat if that's okay. All right. So, I mean, just in as a way of summarizing this, we tend to consider independent social impact professionals, the people that we're helping at the IC Hub, to be any kind of independent professional who provides services that aim to generate social impact. So those who deliver services are self-employed and who work with clients to generate that social impact. Normally, it's people who are providing services to NGOs, social impact focused enterprises, and governmental organizations or intergovernmental organizations like United Nations agencies. And NGOs can also include things like research institutes and think tanks and so on as well. So if you're not in that category, you know, it's not necessarily that you're chasing the wrong thing, but we might not be able to help you, but these are the people we generally help. Also, we'd love to hear a little bit about why you want to become an independent social impact professional or consultant, and also what excites you and what worries you about it, you know, because I think a lot of people can fantasize about it, or indeed go the other way and think that it's something that is just unattainable or too risky, and so on and so forth, which can prevent them from doing something which may actually suit them better. So, and what we want to do at the IC Hub is to try and give you a bit of a balanced portrayal of consulting and some different perspectives on what the reality is like based on our experiences and the experiences of other IC Hubbers as well. So yeah, let us know what excites you, what makes you a bit worried.
Yeah, so type that into the chat box, and we're going to try to fix the thing with the slides. But while you do that,
it is working right now, right? I think. Is that, yeah.
It's working for me.
That's fine then. Can you see the consulting expectations slide? Is that what's displaying on your screen?
No, I can't see.
I can actually.
Oh, some of you can, some of you can't. Anyway, they're really just visual aids. The question still remains, we'll try and sort that out, but the question still remains, you know, what are you excited about or worried about in terms of becoming an independent consultant, you know? Okay, so some really interesting points that we've got so far. So Alison's excited about getting involved in fresh projects regularly, having flexibility. So yes, you certainly do have control over what projects you take on, in the sense that you can say yes, you can say no to any project that you're offered. Obviously, you have to do that hard work to generate the options, but certainly 8 years into this, I have a fair few options over what projects I'm going to do in the coming months. I can say yes and no to things. Also with the caveat of you do have that flexibility, but sometimes if you've taken on a lot of projects, you do have that pressure to deliver them. So, that flexibility comes with a bit of a responsibility as well. Sarah is interested to build a client base and be able to take on opportunities related to her experience. Also, the idea of time-bound assignments and deliverables with different types of organizations and projects is appealing as well. Yeah, absolutely. These are all things that I very much like about consulting. And if you have a bad client, it's a lot better than having a bad boss, because you can just, you end the consult, you have a clear end to the assignment usually. And then after that, if you didn't work well together, then you say no the next time they offer you work. Carmel, diversity of projects, clients, places, choice to choose who to work with, so it's done in a passionate, effective, and straightforward way. Again, yes, definitely. I think, we, especially with my consulting work, until COVID, I was traveling pretty much every month to various places that I find interesting, mainly across the African continent, but I've done missions to Vanuatu, Guyana, various parts of Asia, a lot of variety. But at the same time, when COVID hit, I was able to transition a lot of that online and also only choose projects that didn't require me to travel a lot. In terms of some worries, okay, so lack of clients overloading oneself, worried about whether there's really a market for me and my experiences, getting a few pieces of work under my belt, worried about managing some clients.
For my experience, for example, I know there can be time pressure, yes, and managing relationships under pressure, massive.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I'd say about finding clients and so on is that the approaches that we talk a lot about, especially in our IC Hub Startup Incubator, are really about testing the waters and doing that market research early on, so that you know how to position yourself, what services to offer, and whom to target before you just dive in, quit your job, and so on. And we also look at charting a runway. So working out, we'll talk about that in a moment, but we look at how you can de-risk the process of starting your consulting firm by understanding, how much time you personally can take off in order to try this out. Yeah.
We'll talk about that in depth in a minute. So
jumping the gun.
Yeah, I was excited about it, which is understandable.
Yeah.
So keep in mind these concerns. I think they're very common across the board. I know I had them when starting as a consultant. I still occasionally fall into feeling these worries. So we'll talk about them and how to actually manage them in a very concrete way in a minute. But I think now we'll just kind of focus on, just to give you a taster, on the positive side of consulting. Because obviously it's something we're very passionate about, we've been doing for a while, and we really enjoy. So, from our personal experience, there's this choice of impact which a lot of people mentioned. So how you want to view social impact, what lens you use for international development or whatever you're working on, your influence. So maybe you are working to build yourself up as an expert or a specialist in a particular field or with a particular selling point, I guess. And you can do that a lot more easily, and you're kind of freed from the need to fit into a certain organization's structure. And then there's also the income. So you're choosing what projects to work on. And you also have a bit more say in how you're negotiating those salaries. And then of course, time, lifestyle. Some consultants choose to use that freedom to travel, like we're in Argentina right now. Other consultants use that freedom to go back and go live with their family or take care of family. So that's obviously freedom that can go both ways. And so that's been our experience. We've heard a lot of people who have said that, but then of course with that, there's always a diversity of experiences, and there's always drawbacks to every positive. So yes, that's kind of the positive side, the fluffy bit, and then I think we'll go into more of that, get some more of the
Yeah.
details.
But it's really what you make of it. So if you think about, if I asked you the question, where if you could live anywhere, where would you live? It's gonna differ from person to person. You know, I mean, have a think about that for yourself. We've chosen to live in Burkina Faso, China, India, Argentina, UK. That's probably not going to be the exact choices that many of you will choose. But the point is, it's a framework. Consulting, independent consulting is a framework within which you can design your own lifestyle and also the impact that you wanna have. All right, we're going to go through this pretty quickly because we do want to get to your questions. So just in terms of, oh, Molly.
Oh, yeah. Well, just in terms of the attributes that there's a slide for this, it'll come. So in terms of the attributes that might, I want to say this in the right way, because I don't want to discourage people from trying this out because they feel, oh, it's not for me, or I don't have this trait. So that's why we don't really talk about traits, because I think that a lot of things can be learned, especially if you're aware of what your strengths are and what your weaknesses are. So what we say are attributes or advantages for getting started is the understanding of the sector and the craft. So for example, I do fundraising. So understanding fundraising, understanding how donors are thinking about things, and then the craft of actually how to respond to grant application questions, how to do these different tasks. That's all that kind of skill that I need to bring into my consulting. And then it also helps if you have an existing professional network. So, you know, that can be if you worked for an organization in the past and you have former coworkers, or if you've done networking through events or on LinkedIn or these other ways that you're actually building this network. And then it also helps have the 5 to 10 years of career experience, which we mentioned. It's not obligatory, but it's usually the sweet spot. And then the other one that we said is structured thinking, which is, again, it's something you can learn. I think I have a very messy brain. So for me, I have to organize everything into like to-do lists and charts. And like I send that to my clients to make sure it's crystal clear what I'm doing. If I don't have it written down in a clear way, then my poor messy brain just gets overloaded. So, you know, I think that that's a big one, is teaching yourself how to be structured, how to plan your time, know how much time it's going to take, and then actually follow through on that plan is really important.
Yeah, absolutely. So just, we're not going to go through these things in too much detail. Again, this really is a very abridged version of our IC Hub Startup Incubator program, but you'll recognize some of these different pathways towards becoming a consultant. I think we already spoke about some accidental consultants who are on this call, and also we have some we have an academic as well, and that's also a good pathway to go along to become a consultant. And if you check out our Impact Consulting podcast, what's kind of the reason why we did a podcast is because we wanted to show the different stories that people have in terms of how they became consultants. So, you know, there's an episode, for example, with Ada Ibrisevic, I can't pronounce her name, but she became a consultant from academia. You know, so there's that story, and then there's plenty of other stories of accidental consultants, employee turned consultants, where you end up consulting for your previous employer, and then more of the self-starter, who I would consider myself a self-starter. I mean, a bit accidental consultant as well. You know, a lot of these pathways you may fit into one or more, but you know, there are different things that each person who walks a different pathway will need to do in order to start up, right? Because if you start consulting for your previous employer, you may already have the networks and perhaps don't need to work so hard on the service offering page. But if you're more of a self-starter, then you may have to work a bit harder on those kinds of things. But you may also have other advantages as well. Anyway. So, sorry, the slides are not changing again.
I don't know what's going on. So what we're talking about with what we're calling part 2 is about the actual steps that you need to take to become a consultant. So keeping in mind there are certain things that are good to have going into it, and there are certain things that you might be a little bit weaker on and need to strengthen. But we have all that squared away from the last step. And now we're going to be talking about the steps that you need to take to actually launch.
Exactly.
And so we have this 5-step process that we've made.
And again, we go into a lot more detail about this in the program, but just to try and explain it in broad terms, we start by, and this is the kind of thing where it's not necessarily just step 1, then step 2, then step 3, and step 4. There's a little bit of overlap and a little bit of ongoing work that takes place throughout your consulting journey. But essentially, we start by helping you identify the services that you provide as a consultant, your specialism, how you position yourself. We then look at setting your runway. So this is looking at how long you can survive yourself without having any clients. And the idea about this is to really de-risk the process so that you know for yourself when you need to decide to continue doing this consulting thing, or when you decide to go back and look for a job. So the idea is to really de-risk it and address those fears that we all have very naturally when starting anything new. Step 3 is about launching your minimum viable product, as we call it, and getting your first client. So what we push our startup incubator students to do is to really sprint to that stage of getting that first client under your belt, because then you can learn and iterate again. And we recommend doing that before doing all the legal stuff. Setting up a company or sole trader entity and doing those kinds of boring stuff that you only really need to think about when you're running a business. So after you've gotten that first client. And then we talk about how to then level up and make this into a proper career, but we won't talk too much about that today. In fact, today we're only really going to look at the first 2 steps, because I think for most of you, for where you're at, steps 1 and 2 are probably going to be the most relevant. And we're going to go through them very quickly, so brace yourselves, but definitely happy to answer questions. So yeah, step 1, which you don't see on your screen.
So step 1 is all about identify your services. Yeah, there it goes.
Exactly. So here, of course, I think you can all understand this. This is where you get a sense of, this is where you identify what you're going to do as a consultant. So how are you going to position yourself? And the goal here is really to develop an elevator pitch where you very clearly and very quickly explain what is it you do and whom you do it for. Okay, and that's really key to getting referrals, because people are only going to refer you to potential clients, and clients are only going to find you if they can be very clear about what you do and whom you do it for. So for instance, I'm a migration specialist. I do research work, policy work, and so on for intergovernmental organizations and governmental organizations predominantly.
And I'm a fundraising specialist who works with grassroots NGOs. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
To design fundraising strategies or whatever. I think I have another.
The first part
pitch,
was clear enough, right?
Yeah,
so if you hear of something to do with migration, you may think of me, and when you hear something about fundraising for NGOs, you may think of Molly. So that's really key. It's not about generating referrals consistently. It's not about being the best consultant. It's about people who understanding what it is that you do.
Yeah, and you don't need it to be really fancy. In fact, that can almost make it vague and difficult to put you in a box to kind of say, okay, she does fundraising. So if someone says, I'm having trouble with fundraising, then they say, okay, well, I heard Molly does fundraising. And then, at least they'll put me in touch, and then we can work through if my skills actually fit what they need. But that first little initial hook, which can only be a few words, because really people can only remember a few words at a time. Yeah. And they'll just be like, I have a vague memory of Molly saying fundraising one time. I'll just send it to her and see if there's anything of value.
And so we normally break down these specialisms into thematic, skills-based, and geographic specialisms. So thematic, I think, is fairly clear. Mine would be migration. and you know, you have various other areas of intervention, themes that you may be working on. You can have a skills-based specialism, so that would be a kind of harder skill or service like research, like monitoring, evaluation, learning, like communications. And then you can have a geographic-based specialism, so a geographic area that you have some more contextual knowledge and experience in. We normally, it's good to be more targeted. So normally people might combine a thematic and skills-based specialism, or they may be a skills-based specialist, but without a thematic and geographic specialism. Rarely we have IC hubbers who are only geographic specialists. You tend to need to have a fairly clear service offering. But yeah, generally it's a combination of thematic and skill. That doesn't mean, a misconception about this is that you have to choose one theme to work on, and that's the only thing you can do. And if you're multi-passionate about multiple interests, then you can't be a consultant. This is also, you can also think about a lens through which you work on. So Molly's lens is fundraising. Fundraising is super broad, super general, and she works on lots of different aspects of NGO management through the lens of fundraising. But it's still a kind of very clear way to describe what
I mean, I started as a project manager more. I was more up in that project, you know, management type of space, and that was very general, and it's very hard to hire a project manager as a consultant. You usually want that person to be on staff full time. So I chose fundraising not because I'm just in love with fundraising, but it's a nice lens to see the project design process through, to make sure that they're hitting these different targets, and a good way to work on the structure of the NGO through this lens of fundraising. So yeah, so it doesn't need to be your end all be all, this is the only thing that you care about. But if you have something really targeted, it makes it easier for people to understand what you do. And then you can always, if you nail that, you get that down, you get some projects, you can always expand. But I always advise consultants to start with something really simple and then see how that goes. If it's not really what you want to do, or clients aren't responding to it, then you can always shift, change, add, but start narrow.
Yeah, Elena, your question about pushing a different specialism depending on the case of consultancy. Do you mean like kind of focusing your CV on, like looking for the consultancy and then tailoring your CV accordingly?
Like for example, I have communications, climate change, and East Asia. But I guess that depending on the client, like I don't want to limit myself, you know, I can do, for example, communication in different areas, not just in climate change. So
yeah, it's a very common concern. Like you don't want to, thank you, Alicia. You don't want to box yourself in. You might want to try different things. You're not quite sure at this stage where you should focus on. I would recommend in this case coming up with different profiles. So if you're bidding for a specific kind of project, developing a more targeted profile for that, and then applying with that, instead of saying that you're an expert in A, B, C, D, E, F, G. That's generally what we found.
Yeah, maybe having one CV for communications, one for your environmental work, and then a third for I forget for the geographic Asia, East Asia. And then I think also, at least for me, I was doing that at first. And then as I started getting more work specifically in fundraising, I realized that that's more what clients were wanting. So I used to have like 5 different CVs, and now I'm down to 1 because I found that just from testing it and trying it and working with clients, I found that was more popular. And so I ended up, that's how I chose this particular one, so that it can also be a good way of testing different routes and seeing which one gets the best response.
Exactly. This is all about testing, really.
Yeah.
I'm going to go through this super quickly. So, of course, once you define your specialisms, you can define the kinds of services that you provide. The ones you see on your screen, that I believe you do see on your screen this time, are the typical services that different consultants provide.
Sorry to interrupt.
Yes.
Is graphic design a part of consultancy services?
Absolutely. Graphic design can be a consultancy service, and it can be also your skills-based specialism too. So there's a bit of overlap in terms of services and then skills-based specialism.
Yeah, because a lot of NGOs, a lot of international organizations do use graphic design people, and yeah, if you have a specialism within that,
yeah,
it can be a good consultant. We have some in the IC Hub, that's why we brought it up. But
exactly.
yeah, but it can also be a more general skill as well.
Absolutely. Again, so we want to get to your questions, so we're going to go for this super quickly. But essentially, from this step one, we want you to be able to have a clear idea of your thematic, skills-based geographic specialism, so that you can communicate what you do very clearly and quickly to potential clients. And we also want you to identify your client avatar, so that you know who to target. And for example, mine would be a program manager who works in the field of migration for an international NGO or an intergovernmental organization. Having identified that, it's much easier to do targeted networking. Now, the harder question is obviously, how do you actually determine these things, right? How do you actually determine your specialisms, your services, and so on? Market research is very key at this stage. So you can do this by looking at consultancies that interest you. So looking at who is hiring for what consultancies and the language that the clients use to source consultants. You can also, we also recommend doing kind of market research calls with your network. So speaking with people, your previous colleagues perhaps, and others within your network to find out how they hire consultants and so on. You can also look at the IC Hub members directory to see how other consultants position themselves. So there's a lot of different ways you can do this. Again, we walk through this in more detail in the IC Hub Accelerator workshop, IC Hub Incubator workshop. Again, briefly through step two. So step two is all about establishing a runway. So this is all about addressing that fear that many people have up front about the risk involved in starting something new. And this is the case with starting an independent consulting business, it's the case with starting any kind of business or anything that involves quitting your regular paycheck. So what we recommend doing here is to really try and determine your actual living and business expenses. You know, how much does it cost you per month to live, or what's the minimum you can live on? Understanding how much in savings you've got. From there, you can also work out, you can estimate your consulting fee. And just, we've got an article on consulting fees to help you work that out. But, you know, we generally say that, you know, 300 euros or US dollars per day is kind of like, for international consultants, a fairly base rate. And from that monthly living and business expenses and your savings figure, you'll be able to work out how long you can survive without getting any consulting work. So we're looking really at your worst case scenario here. You know, what if you don't get any consulting work? Okay, and it's also about looking at how many days do you need to work in order to cover your living and business expenses. And if you often when you calculate that, you realize that it's a very small number of working days. It can be as little as working 3 to 6 working days per month. And that can also be a helpful exercise in making you think, oh, actually, it is quite reasonable for me to get 3 to 6 working days per month. This is actually possible. So that's what we talk our IC Hub startup students through when we go through this step. And we provide a lot of tools and stuff and examples of how to actually do that. But this is something you can definitely do yourself as well. And another part of this is establishing not only that trial period of how long you will actually try this out for, but also establishing a go or no-go criteria. What we mean by that is saying, okay, what is my criteria for success after this trial period that will make me decide whether or not to continue as a consultant. And that can be a specific amount that you earn per month. It can be a number of clients that you've earned, that you've gained. So this is the idea of this is really to kind of make it very clear before you even start how long you're going to try this for, what success looks like, and then when you would then decide to go back into the job market.
Yeah, I think, I mean, for me, I definitely felt that one of the difficulties I had was, the feeling of risk, the feeling of fear, the feeling of feelings, basically the emotional side of things. So if you look at your trial period, your runway, as basically as concretely as possible. So you're putting a time limit on it. You know that you can definitely survive in that time and you can give it your all during that time. And then it also takes the emotions out that sometimes, when I deliver for a project, I'm like, I feel amazing. I'm on top of the world. I did the best work ever. I'm going to be the best consultant ever. And then maybe, the next day I get a call from a client and they're like, oh, I didn't like your work or whatever. And then I feel down in the dumps and I feel like, okay, I'm going to quit and do something else. So I think that like emotional roller coaster can really cloud your judgment. So if you put this criteria into place, you can make sure that you're really making the best judgment given your circumstances, and you're making these decisions when you're not on the roller coaster. And then it just makes it so much easier for you to go through and actually commit, and takes away a lot of those feelings of doubt and fear. And so that's why we recommend this method. And then we also recommend to test things, try things out, give yourself the space to feel like you can try things without running out of money and falling into despair.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, we'll skip the remaining steps because these are really kind of things that you do once you get that first consulting client. But those are really kind of, I suppose, some of the key things that you need to know early on. Mm-hmm. People often have questions about the legal stuff, so we'll just very briefly address that. But we really recommend doing the legal stuff after you've actually gotten a consultancy, and are sure that you want to do this. But generally, you need to have a bank account. Depending on where you live, which country you live in, you may need a separate business bank account. In countries like the UK, you can just use your personal bank account. You'll have to do some basic bookkeeping, issue invoices, deal with some contracts. Business cards is really a thing you don't need to do right at the beginning. A lot of people start with the business cards, but it's really something you don't need to do, especially in this post-pandemic era, pandemic era rather. And then, there'll be various ways that you deal with taxes depending on your jurisdiction. You may also have to get some sort of insurance if you do a kind of service where you might get sued by your clients for damages. But for most of IC Hubbers doing things like research work and training, you don't really need liability insurance, but you may do anyway. But
we'll go into that.
Yeah,
that's kind of a different. It's a different thing, but the point is that we do have resources about all these things, but obviously it takes a bit more of an in-depth discussion to actually
I'm sure most of you didn't come to this webinar thinking that you'd get everything you need to know to start an amazing consulting business in an hour, as much as we try to give you as much value as possible.
We're really trying to cram everything in.
Yeah, so in terms of next steps, and we'll come to the Q&A in just 1 minute. There's two options really. So if you're still thinking about whether you might do this, whether this is right for you, we have two free email mini courses for the kind of reflection and startup phase. We'll share them in the chat. And we recommend, the email mini courses. It involves us emailing you every day for about 5 days or so. There's one for people in the reflection stage, so trying to go into a bit more detail about what it's actually like to be a consultant, what things you might need to think about to decide if it's right for you. And then we also have our startup email mini course, free email mini course, which takes you into some more detail into the other steps of this 5-step process. Secondly, we do have our IC Hub Startup Incubator. We've got a great little group at the moment. Sarah's in there, so
if you want to hang out with Sarah, then that's the place to be.
Exactly, and we've got some just really great consultants who are already getting some really amazing results. Silvio, who was in here a moment ago but had to leave. He started off, he's a relatively young consultant. He started consulting part-time alongside his full-time job as a Canadian civil servant, still in his 20s, I believe. but he's just really killing it, getting quite a lot of consulting work, and has actually just decided to quit his job because he's had several consulting assignments lined up. You know, there's it kind of just shows that even though he's in his 20s and didn't really come in with much of a network or a name, by starting very purposefully and really taking action on some of the stuff that we try to teach at the startup incubator, he's really been able to see some great results. But you know, it's up to you. We have the free resources for those who are not yet sure, and then we also have the startup incubator program for those who are really sure and who are ready to take that action. And it's 50% off at the moment because it's still in the beta. We're still testing it and gathering feedback. So instead of I think it's $115 US, it's half of that. And it is very much possible to be earning $300 US or more per day from this. So we do think it pays for itself. And we're very proud of what we've created. You know, it includes more access to us. We've actually got office hours later on where we have smaller sessions with our startup incubator students. We're kind of their cheerleaders. We promote them. We share, you know, we try to introduce them to members of our network. And it's very much a self-guided but practically focused course. But anyway, Molly's going to share links to all of those things in the chat. So choose which one makes sense for you. And in any case, we hope that you've found this webinar useful, and we very much like to hear any questions that you have and answer any questions that you have. So thank you very much. Questions from anyone, either through the chat or just unmute your microphones and yeah, tell us your questions.
I have a question about the startup incubator because I was very interested in that. Is it on a one-to-one basis? Is it a group thing, and it's possible to start at any time?
So it's the way it works. It's a series of video lessons with us that are self-guided, and we go through each step one at a time. And it's the kind of thing where, you know, you may want to go through it all straight away and then come back to specific steps based on, you know, where you feel you need to work more. In addition, it has all the kind of different tools. It has a worksheet that you can work through. And then we have office hours for all of our courses and workshops, about once or twice a month. So there you can just join. It's, I mean, we've just started it, right? So far it's been like 2 or 3 people on a call because yeah, it's just started. And they're like hour-long calls where, you know, whether you're in the startup incubator or the level up accelerator, you can drop in and ask us your questions. And then there's a Slack community as well. So we have the incubator Slack community where you can connect with other people who are also in the process of starting their launching their startups.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
I posted in the chat about joining existing consultancies, and I'm really interested to see Carmel's response being. It wasn't really for her because I'm quite, well, yeah, I've got very mixed feelings about it because yeah, I just don't know really whether it's worth it, because obviously there's a fee splitting arrangement that is quite punitive, I would say, to bringing in new work. So yeah, I'm just quite interested in it. When you're, I kind of like the appeal of working with other people and working in structure and somebody helping me make less mistakes. You know, I'm very aware that I'm kind of new to this and I'm going to mess up along the way, and the idea of having people saying, oh no, don't say that, or, you know, whatever, is really appealing. But the more I've looked into it and the more conversations I've had, the more it feels like I'd be doing all of the hard work, bringing the work in, and then giving them a minimum 20% of what I've brought in. And I just don't know whether I'm being cynical. I just don't know. Like, I want it to be wonderful. Like, I want it to be like, wouldn't it be great? You know, we all like-minded and we're working together and da 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 da. And then it sort of feels, yeah. I'd just be interested to have your responses.
I mean,
so just to clarify, this is the question is whether you it's a good idea to join a consulting firm as like a kind of external consultant contracted by a consulting firm. Okay, I think Molly's a good person to answer this because.
Well, I think sorry to interrupt, but I just give you a real so it's basically an existing consulting firm who have approached me to join as an associate director to build out their practice in my area of expertise.
Salaried or just based on, but okay.
Yeah, because, well, I'd say there is just such a variety of consulting firms and how they actually work. So, well, Luxan maybe has his perspective because he has worked or like has toyed with the idea of more of the ones that are working on really, really big bids, I guess, like this, like body shop.
You have the large consulting firms that deliver big technical assistance projects for, you know, EU, the European Commission, or USAID. You know, Ananti, who was on the call earlier, she actually works for one of those kinds of firms, and they basically just get CVs together, put the team together, and then they do those projects kind of like as independent consultants, but under the name of the consulting firm, then they take a cut. But then you have a lot of different types of consulting firms. So I think Molly can talk about what is actually her main client.
Yeah, I work a lot with more like the boutique ones, I guess you could say, where there's one, they're UK based, and the founders are very kind of hands-on with everything. They started this coming from a more professional background in like communications or something, and they wanted more free time for family and other, you know, like a more rounded, holistic lifestyle. And then so they actually go out, they're really good at getting business, and then I'm more of the technical support. So I'm in there doing what I do best, which is, you know, the details and the grant writing and working with the client. And then I just bill them for however long it takes. They don't notice at all as long as I send an invoice at the end of the month. So I really enjoy working with them, but I felt, you know, it really depends because it depends on the personalities of the people involved. And I've had interviews with other ones where I just had a bad feeling about it, where I just felt like you say, it's going to be a lot of work and not much payoff, or I didn't like their working style. So I don't know, there's a lot of variety there, but if you like the idea of working for a consulting firm, there are ones out there that might be a good fit for you. Maybe this one that you're talking about might not be a good fit, or they might be expecting too much, or I don't know, if it feels weird, it might not be the best one for you.
If they want you to do the business development, and if you don't like the sound of doing business development, then it's probably not a good fit. But in the case of Molly's, she does the implementation, they pay her the fees that she charges, so they're her client, you know. It's and it works well.
It works well, yeah. And I can say no at any time if I'm like, oh, that project, I'm not available at that time, then they'll find a different consultant to do it. And it's been one of my favorite clients for sure. And a lot of times, you know, they just let me get on with it, and I just CC them in the emails. So I don't know, it really depends on the type of consulting firm, but there are ones out there that I don't want to say are shady, but maybe are like have a different working style.
Yeah.
Maybe could be
this one is based in Tunbridge Wells, Kent as well, so it's a sort of a Kentish.
Like 15 miles, 15 minutes away from me. So no, thank you. They're very nice people, and I think they would be wonderful to work with, but it's just I think that I'd still have to do the stuff that I find hard right now. Like what I'm looking for is a pipeline and a hand-holding exercise, and they're not. I think they're basically saying, yeah, anyway. I don't want to.
So you may want to focus on consulting firms that do the business development and ask you to do implementation.
I can recommend one that I had a friend worked for, and they're more of this boutique type where I think they do the business development and then pass to consultants. I'll put it in the chat. I don't know for sure that they're good. I don't know, you know, I'm not like vouching for them, but they might be worth checking out. Might be more of what you're looking for.
Yeah. Cool. Any other questions? Speak now or forever hold your peace.
I have lots of questions, but I think maybe I should just hold on to them and hopefully get involved in the incubator rather than just turning this into a therapy session.
Sure. Well, I mean, you're welcome to ask. Well, I'll just see if the quieter ones on this call, Anna Laura, Amin, Carmel, any questions from your side? Elena, you too, but you know, I feel you're not shy. No, okay. Well, Alison, feel free to ask another question before, and we can make that the last question before we go then.
I guess it's just like a general question about this kind of accidental consulting, because I'm a real framework and process person, and I love the fact that you've put together a framework and a process, none of which applies to the situation I find myself in, which is, I think, part of my kind of what am I trying to do here? And I think I'd sort of braced myself for lots of the difficult things about transitioning into consultancy, and but the one thing that I hadn't really thought about is the fact that I think I feel as though I'm trying to do a double pitch, and that I'm trying to create a market that I'm then pitching myself into, because it's quite a small sort of area that I'm working in, and there's not really an established work pattern, and there's not very many people doing it, but it really needs to grow, and everyone knows it needs to grow. So
is this the faith environment thing?
Yeah, this sort of at a sort of global level stuff. So and I feel like whenever I talk to anybody else about being a consultant, they're doing stuff, or they're a fundraiser or a communication specialist or a M&E or something like that, where there kind of is a market, like you're sort of pitching into a market and competing, and I'm sure it's still very tricky, but I'm just wondering whether at what point if I'm finding it hard to find the work, does it mean that there's not the work there, is the question. I mean, you can't answer that.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where it's just about the market research, really, like and you can try to market it. You can try to market it before you can start blogging, for instance, to see if you get the interest in it. You can talk to organizations directly who you think might be interested in it. It's one of those things where there are ways to test this before saying I'm going to go all in on being independent faith-based climate change work consultant, if you see what I mean.
And one thing I don't know, maybe you've done this or not, but we've had a IC hubber in the past who just, he wasn't sure what he wanted to do exactly. So he put a question with like 2 options, and he just put that up on his LinkedIn as just like a LinkedIn post. And quite a lot of people answered with their opinions about, should he go in this direction or that direction? So, you could always say, I'm thinking about doing this thing. It'd be great to get feedback. And then, people could respond, and then you could always reach out to them and say, oh, can I just borrow 30 minutes of your time to discuss? And getting that research without pitching anything might be a good way to start feeling it out. And then you can ask a question like, if this was a service, like what would you expect it to contain? How much would you expect to pay for it? And then obviously the next test is to actually try to sell it. But just that original kind of feeling, testing the water, seeing how you would word it, how you would position it, and then building it out from there. And it could be just something simple like asking your existing network what they think.
Cool. All right. Well, is that okay? Great. Thanks. Well, thank you everyone for joining. Really appreciate it. And we really hope it helped. And, if you have any other questions, we have the Facebook group as well. So feel free to ask more questions, and, then you'll be able to get input from others as well. But anyway, stay tuned. We'll keep sending you, as long as you're a part of the IC Hub, and we'll keep sending you stuff that will hopefully help you. And yeah, just wishing you all the best on your impact consulting journey, and best of luck getting launched. And I think pretty much all of you are in. I think there was only one person who was very much in the kind of new professional stage, but pretty much everyone else on this call has the required experience. So, you know, you're all very much capable of doing it, but, you know, it's up to you to decide if it's for you, and, you know, if you need our help in doing so. Anyway, all the best, take care, and good evening.
And stay in touch.
Yeah. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye. Bye-bye.
Bye.